You're not even mentioned in the transition plan." She said it like she was reading off a grocery list. Not cruel, not kind. Just done. Her eyes didn't meet mine. They flicked across the screen, across the Teams call, and then back to her notes. Rachel Kim, Director of Governance Innovation. New title, new smile. Same desk I used to sit at. I didn't respond. I nodded, clicked the red Leave Meeting button, and sat there, palms open on the desk like someone had handed me nothing and expected me to be grateful. That was February 3rd, a Thursday, the kind of gray Midwest afternoon where even the snow feels tired. I remember the smell of the microwaved lentil soup drifting from the kitchen. My daughter's footsteps overhead. She was home from school early. And I sat there still in a collared shirt, still logged into systems I no longer owned, and realized something with perfect clarity: they'd already moved on. My name is Thomas Brantley, 42. For the better part of the last decade, I was a senior compliance manager for our Dentist Financial Systems, a mid-sized fintech firm in Columbus, Ohio. We weren't flashy, but we handled real money, real clients. Pension funds, state government contracts. Enough red tape to keep a man like me busy for a lifetime. I liked rules. I liked keeping them clean. I'd worked hard to get here, from call center grunt to back office analyst to eventually building out the firm's internal audit pathways. I wasn't a disruptor. I wasn't gunning for VP. I just wanted things done right and quietly. The funny thing about being the quiet one is people forget you're watching. My office before it became Rachel's had no window, but I didn't mind. I liked the stillness. The hum of the server rack down the hall. I liked the feeling of being buried under policy documents and outdated flowcharts. It felt honest. It felt like work. My days were predictable. Wake up at 6, brew coffee while the house was still dark, pack my daughter's lunch, log in by 8:15, review system flags, clear exceptions, monitor escalations. Most of the time, I could spot a cover-up 3 layers before it made the dashboard. People don't know how much they say when they try to say nothing. That's what made Rachel stand out. She joined the company 6 months before that February call, poached from a Chicago firm. I still remember her welcome email full of buzzwords. Synergize compliance, rethink governance, culture of proactive transparency. I raised an eyebrow, but I said nothing. I gave her space. She was young, bright, assertive, the kind of personality that gets invited to things. At first it was subtle. My recurring one-ones with Kevin, my VP, started getting rescheduled, then shortened, then canceled altogether. I'd been in those slots for years, never missed one. Suddenly Rachel was in his office every other day. Strategy sessions, leadership syncs, phrases with no agenda, no notes, no visibility. Still, I didn't think much of it. I figured they wanted fresh ideas. Maybe she'd impress them, shake things up a bit. Good for her. I kept my head down. I kept delivering. Then I noticed my reports weren't getting reviewed. Flags I'd raised, red ones, real ones, were being ignored or reassigned. A vendor audit I'd initiated was reassigned to her. When I asked, I was told it was part of broadening cross-functional exposure. I asked Kevin directly in a rare face-to-face. He smiled the way people do when they're trying not to admit something. We just think it's time to rotate leadership bandwidth a bit, Tom. Nothing personal. You've been the rock here for so long, we want to give others a chance to grow. Nothing personal. It's never personal when they push you out. Just soft phrases, polished edges, reassignments, and developmental opportunities. I told myself to stay calm. I told myself it was temporary. But the knot in my gut knew better. I've spent my career studying what people hide, and what they were hiding now was me. It all crystallized the day I received that email. It was from Susan in HR, meant to go to Kevin and Rachel, CC'd me by mistake, a PDF attachment Phase 2 transition deck. Internal eyes only. I opened it, and there it was, an org chart, color-coded boxes, leadership tiers, KPIs for the new fiscal year. Rachel's face beamed from the top right. Underneath leads governance innovation, consolidated oversight of audit risk and internal controls, which used to be me. I wasn't on the chart, not even in the advisory group, no footnote, no transitional support role, no dotted line. I sat back in my chair, clicked through every slide, 10 in total, not one mention of my name. That's when I knew. I wasn't losing a job. I'd already lost it. They were just waiting for me to realize it on my own. And when I did, they would smile, offer some vague exploratory options, and walk me out with a coffee mug and a LinkedIn endorsement. So I smiled back. I forwarded the email to my personal account, saved the PDF, took a screenshot of the Slack channel where Rachel was already directing tasks to the junior team using my workflows, opened a private folder, named it Continuity. Then I stood up, walked upstairs, kissed my daughter on the forehead, and poured myself a glass of water, because something in me had gone quiet, and I knew it was time to listen to that silence. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was angry, not yet. Anger needs oxygen. What I felt was more like a vacuum, a slow, precise collapse of everything I thought was solid. I laid there beside my wife, staring at the ceiling, hearing the faint click of the thermostat. The house creaked like it always did in winter. Familiar sounds, but nothing inside me felt familiar anymore. Around 3 a.m., I got up, opened the laptop, and started collecting. Emails first. I filtered everything with Rachel's name, then Kevin's. Every project handoff, every meeting I was removed from, every praise they'd once written me, and every thread that went quiet after she came on board. Next were screenshots. Slack threads where decisions were made without me, approvals rerouted where my name was left off even when my work was at the center. Threads that started just looped Rachel in so we can move quicker. Threads that ended with "Thanks, Rachel, this is exactly what we needed." I wasn't paranoid. I was present. That's what made it worse. I watched it happen, step by step, and still believed somehow that merit would protect me. At 6:45, I closed the laptop, made coffee, packed my daughter's lunch, turkey, cucumber, a cookie with a post-it note. "Good luck on your quiz today. I'm proud of you." She smiled when I handed it to her, still in her oversized hoodie and socks. She didn't know, not yet, that I was losing something, that the house she grew up in ran partly on a man quietly unraveling. At 8:05, I logged into Zoom. There was a collaboration sync on the calendar. I wasn't invited again, but the invite had no password. So I watched. Rachel was leading. Kevin nodded along. They discussed the upcoming compliance roadmap, a roadmap I had designed 2 fiscal quarters ago in the meeting they called my legacy presentation. She used my language, my metrics, even my deck template. I knew because I'd built it late one night in PowerPoint using a color code my daughter picked when she was helping me test slide transitions. No credit, no mention. At 8:37, she said, as we move into Q2, I'd like to decouple our auditing process from the legacy design and move into something leaner. Legacy. That was me. I had become the ghost of a process no one wanted to admit they'd copied. I turned off the camera feed, sat in silence, and then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened my personal Gmail, typed employment lawyer Columbus, Ohio, clicked the first name that didn't look like a billboard ad. The email I sent was short. I used my wife's maiden name. I said I had questions about internal reassignments, constructive dismissal, and hostile transitions. I didn't use company names. I didn't mention titles. I just wrote, I think they want me out. But they're pretending I'm still in. I've got documentation and time. I'd like to know what my silence is worth. He replied within an hour. We set a call for that Friday. I took PTO, told HR I had family needs. They nodded, replied with a wellness check-in email, and CC'd Rachel. Of course they did. That afternoon, Kevin called me, said he wanted to touch base. I answered. He sounded warm. Artificially so, said Tom. I know there's been some turbulence lately, and I just want you to know how much we value your steady presence. I said nothing. He continued, we're at an inflection point. You've built the foundation. Now we're in a phase of strategic acceleration. And I really think there's a path forward where your experience can shine in more of a mentorship capacity. I asked what that meant. He paused, then said, it's more about influence than ownership now. That sentence stuck with me. Influence, not ownership. It's how people explain giving your life's work to someone else and expecting you to clap from the sidelines. I told him I needed time to think. He said, take all the time you need. What he meant was take time, fade out, don't make noise. That night my wife asked if everything was okay. I told her I was fine. I lied, not because I didn't trust her, but because I didn't want her to carry it. The weight, the humiliation of being replaced without being told. The kind of betrayal that doesn't bleed out loud but corrodes from the inside. Over the next few weeks, the erasure continued. My profile was removed from the leadership highlights section of the company newsletter. My project leads were told to align with new governance. One even emailed me privately. This doesn't feel right. Are you okay? I replied, just observing. Because I was. I watched the infrastructure I built get polished and rebranded. I watched Rachel take meetings with clients I had trained her to handle. I watched Kevin use my name in past tense. Tom did some great groundwork for this. As if I'd already left. As if I wasn't still sitting 2 floors down, badge still active, and quietly each day I saved. Saved time-stamped edits, forwarded PDF drafts to myself, collected call recordings. Ohio's a one-party consent state. Every system that once belonged to me still remembered me. They'd taken the title, not the access. By the time I had my 3rd meeting with the lawyer, I had 67 pages of compiled evidence, a digital log of professional euthanasia. He read it all, slowly, carefully. Then he looked up and said, "You're not crazy. They've just been subtle." That was the first time I felt something other than numb. I felt seen. He said, "You're not crazy. They've just been subtle." That line stayed with me. Subtle, like a leak behind a wall, like a smile with a knife under it, like being slowly rewritten out of your own life while the lights are still on and everyone pretends nothing's changed. The lawyer's name was Daniel Ruiz, mid-50s, sharp voice, slower hands. He didn't hype anything, Didn't promise outcomes, just listened carefully and then laid out options. You have 3, he said. You can walk, no fight, close the door. You can negotiate an exit, maybe angle for severance, but they'll make you sign NDAs, waivers. Or we document everything, quietly, file a formal complaint for constructive dismissal, maybe even age discrimination if we build the case right. He paused. But I'll tell you now, Tom. If you do the last one, don't expect a war. Expect a wall. They'll freeze you out faster than they already are. I asked him if it was worth it. He looked straight at me and said, "Do you need it to be?" I didn't answer. Because the truth was, I didn't know what I wanted. Justice, closure. Or just for someone else to finally say, yes, this was wrong. It wasn't in your head. They knew what they were doing. I left his office with a folder and a question I wasn't ready to answer. Back at work, things grew quieter. I still had my title technically, still had an email signature, still had a desk. But the current had shifted. The energy had changed. People walked past me like they were avoiding a room that smelled of mold. I wasn't dangerous, just uncomfortable. A reminder of what happens when loyalty turns into liability. Even the interns stopped making eye contact. Rachel was all smiles in meetings, assertive, cheerful, fast. She dropped phrases like pivot ready and lean forward compliance like she'd swallowed a corporate thesaurus. Kevin adored her. I started noticing a pattern every time I flagged an oversight in her work, a misfiled audit report, a missed check-in with a vendor, an improperly stored PII log. The response wasn't thanks, it was silence, or worse, redirection. I'd hear it in passing. Tom's feedback is appreciated, but we're trying not to over-engineer things right now. Translation. Let it slide. We like her more. I kept everything. The document folders on my home drive multiplied, labeled by month, cross-referenced with meeting dates, a spreadsheet mapping exclusions, how many recurring meetings I'd been removed from, which weekly agendas stopped listing my department. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about record. I remember the moment I decided. It was a Tuesday morning, mid-March. Rainy. I was in the office early like always. Coffee from home because I stopped using the break room 2 months ago. I didn't need the side eyes. The quick shuffle of conversation whenever I walked in. I logged in, checked my inbox. There was a new Slack message from Rachel. It was short. Hey Tom, I'm meeting with Compliance Council today, re-onboarding vendors. We're sunsetting your intake framework. We'll keep you in the loop as needed. No explanation, no discussion, just sunsetting. I stared at it for a while. Read it 3 times. That framework took me 7 months to build. Reduced vendor onboarding times by 22%. Got us through our last Tier 2 audit with 0 flags. She was dismantling it, piece by piece, and calling it innovation. At 9:14 a.m., I opened a new tab. I typed EEOC complaint process, printed the intake form, scanned the requirements, sent Daniel an email with the subject line, "Let's move forward." I didn't tell anyone. Not my wife, not yet. Some decisions feel better in silence. Over the next week, Daniel helped me refine the documentation. He coached me on language, showed me how to frame what had happened not as bitterness but as pattern. A pattern of marginalization, age bias, strategic exclusion. He said, "You're not making this up. You're drawing the map they tried to erase." That helped. A few days later, I formally submitted the complaint. constructive dismissal, age discrimination, and workplace retaliation, all filed, logged, and on the record. The moment I clicked submit, I didn't feel powerful. I felt tired, but there was peace in it. Like closing a door you didn't realize had been open to a cold draft for months. Within 10 days, HR reached out. "We'd like to open a dialogue," they wrote. "Understand your concerns, find a collaborative path forward." I didn't reply. Daniel did. They tried to arrange a listening session, tried to reframe it as a miscommunication of strategic intent. Kevin sent a personal note. Soft words, non-apologies. Said he regretted the pace of change might have felt isolating. Felt isolating. As if I'd caught a chill from walking too slowly. Daniel responded with the case file. That's when everything changed. Not publicly, they didn't make a scene. But quietly, just like before, access began disappearing, slowly. Admin rights revoked, invitations vanished. They said it was system consolidation. I still had my badge, still showed up. But I knew the countdown had started. Rachel stopped messaging, Kevin stopped speaking, HR set up a transition review I attended, took notes, said little. They offered a soft exit. No firing, just mutually agreed separation terms. I asked for severance, a year. They countered with 6 months. Daniel negotiated 10. I signed. No headlines, no courtroom, just a signature, a manila envelope, and a whisper of truth carved into the official record. The day I left, no one said goodbye, not out of cruelty, not even indifference. They just didn't know, or pretended not to. No email went out, no farewell Zoom, no boxed cupcakes or signed card. I packed up my things on a Wednesday morning early enough that even the front desk security wasn't in yet. Carried a cardboard box with a framed photo of my daughter in 3rd grade, a stress ball in the shape of a gavel, and a legal pad full of notes I didn't need anymore. The office smelled like old carpet and burnt coffee, just like it always had. As I stood by the elevator, badge still clipped to my belt, I looked down the hall one last time. Rachel's door was open. She was on a call headset and voice bright. The word alignment floated out like a reflex. She laughed. She was good at it. Polished. Ready. She didn't look up, and I didn't wave. The elevator opened. I stepped in. No dramatic pause, no cinematic sting. Just 4 metal walls and a soft ding as the doors closed behind me. That's how a decade ended. Not with a bang, not even with a whisper, just with less. I got in my car, turned the key, and sat there for a while. Didn't drive, didn't cry, just sat. Hands on the steering wheel, breathing like a man who'd finally stopped holding it in. Outside, the rain had lightened. April in Ohio, the kind that doesn't decide if it wants to be spring or a rerun of winter. I thought I would feel relief, maybe even a surge of righteousness. But what I felt was closer to mourning, not for the job, that was long gone, but for the version of me who believed that if you just did the work, kept your head down, kept it clean, you'd be protected. I had walked that line for years, tight-roped between loyalty and self-erasure. And all it got me was a polite dismissal wrapped in silence. The NDA was standard. Daniel had read every clause. I was allowed to say I left. I just couldn't say why. But the EEOC filing that was separate, that would live on paper with timestamps and evidence and my name typed in full. That was the piece I kept. I went home and placed the box on the kitchen table. My wife walked in from the backyard, gardening gloves on dirt on her knees. She looked at me, then the box, then me again. You're done, I nodded. She didn't say congratulations, didn't ask what now. She just came over, put her arms around me, held me longer than she had in weeks. That night I slept, really slept. No checking Slack, no phantom calendar alerts, no drafts in my mind of what I'd say in the next meeting that never came. And in the morning I made pancakes, real ones, not the microwave kind. My daughter came down with bed hair and wide eyes. Are you off today? I said I'm off every day now. She smiled. Cool. Can you pick me up after school? Yeah. Yeah, I can. It was the first time in months I said something without hearing it echoed by a meeting invite in my head. Over the next few weeks, I started breathing differently. I'd forgotten how long a walk could feel when it wasn't bookended by a deadline. I took on small consulting work, quiet projects, policy writing for nonprofits, one-off compliance reviews for local businesses. The kind of things no one brags about on LinkedIn, but they paid. And they left room to think. Then one day something happened. I got an email from Melissa Chen. She used to be in our procurement department. Left 2 years before I did. Good woman, smart, soft-spoken subject line. I saw what you filed. Inside just wanted to say thank you. I didn't have the words when they moved me out. Thought maybe I imagined it. I didn't. You proved that. And I'm sorry they did that to you too. I stared at the screen for a long time. It was the first time anyone had said it out loud that what happened to me was real. That it wasn't just ego or insecurity or some man failing to keep up. It was design. I wrote back, you weren't imagining it. They just got better at hiding it. I'm glad you saw it. I'm glad I wasn't alone. From there, a trickle. 2 other emails, then 4. People I'd worked with for years, some I hadn't spoken to since the copier jammed in 2019 started reaching out. Quiet thanks, quiet apologies, quiet solidarity. And I realized something. I wasn't the only ghost in that building, just the first one who decided not to stay invisible. It wasn't dramatic, this new chapter. There was no second act music swelling in the background, no sudden clarity or purpose, just space. Empty calendar days that used to be color-blocked with meetings. Silence where my phone used to buzz every 15 minutes with just circling back messages. At first, I didn't know what to do with that silence. It felt too wide, like a room with no furniture. But slowly it began to hold me. I started going on walks in the late morning, the kind of time I never used to think of as mine. Just neighborhood sidewalks I'd driven past for years without ever noticing the cracked bricks or the smell of early lilac in spring. There was a coffee shop 2 blocks from the house I'd never been inside. It had crooked tables and baristas who remembered names. The first time I ordered, the girl behind the counter asked, "Are you working from home today?" I paused, then said something like that. She nodded as if that was enough, and it was. Some mornings I'd bring a legal pad and scribble ideas, not business plans, not PowerPoint decks, just thoughts. Lists of what I remembered from the last 10 years. The names I missed. The parts of the job that still lingered. The small things I never got to say. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about justice anymore. It was about getting my voice back, not the loud kind, not the public kind, just the one I used to trust when no one else was in the room. My wife noticed the difference. She started leaving the back door open in the morning, letting the air drift in. She started talking to me in the kitchen again, really talking, not just logistics and school pickups and weekend lists. She asked one night after the dishes, "Do you miss it?" I didn't answer right away. Then said, "I miss who I thought I was there." And that was the truth. I didn't miss the meetings or the performance reviews or the half-hearted happy hours. I missed the feeling that I mattered, that my quiet way of doing things, of holding standards, of making sure things didn't slip through the cracks had value. Because for a long time it did. Until it didn't. Until visibility became currency. Until packaging outpaced principle. Until the company I had helped steady decided to trade me in for a shinier version, one with better optics, better keywords, better alignment. But the funny thing is, once I stopped trying to be seen, I started seeing more. I saw my daughter differently. Saw the way she lingers in doorways before asking for help with homework. The way she watches my face to see if I'm still carrying something. I saw my wife differently too, not as someone I had to protect from my stress, but as someone who had been quietly bracing herself for my unraveling and holding the threads until I was ready to start again. I started cooking more. Nothing fancy, just eggs in the morning, soup in the afternoon. There's something healing in the act of preparing food no one demanded from you. Around mid-May, I got a call from a former coworker, Nate from Risk Operations. He said, "Hey man, I heard what went down. I didn't ask how." He paused, then added, "They're doing it to Kelly now. Slowly. Same playbook." I said nothing. Then he said, "Just wanted to say you were the real deal, Tom. Thought you should hear that." That sentence sat with me for days. You were the real deal. It's a strange kind of grief, realizing that some of your best work will only be remembered quietly by the people who saw it, not the ones who rewarded it. But it's also a strange kind of grace. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to prove anything. Not to a boss, not to a board, not even to myself. Just to the next man who walked that same hallway wondering why his name disappeared from the agenda. Why his voice started echoing in meetings where it used to land. And maybe, just maybe, he'd remember that someone else had been there before. Had seen the same walls close in, and chose not to go quietly even if he never raised his voice. It was late June when I saw Kevin again. Not at a conference, not on LinkedIn, not through some dramatic encounter. Just the grocery store. I was standing in front of the yogurt aisle comparing expiration dates when I heard his voice. Before, I saw him that same smooth tone he used in performance reviews when he was about to redirect praise without sounding harsh. Yeah, I'll call him back. Just grabbing something for Sophie's recital." I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I knew that cadence, that easy charm. But then I heard him say my name. "Hey, Tom." I looked up. There he was. Tan, casual, relaxed, wearing the kind of polo shirt that says "I still take weekend calls, but only the important ones." He looked surprised, not guilty, just awkward. Like he'd run into an ex he'd forgotten he hurt. He smiled. "Didn't expect to see you around here." I nodded. "Still live on Pinecrest." "Oh, right." He cleared his throat. "How's everything?" I said. "Good." That word sat between us like a boundary. Clean. Complete. He hesitated, shifted his basket in one hand, then said, "I heard about the complaint." I didn't respond. He added, "Legal said it's resolved, but, you know." Still felt weird. You and I worked together for what, 10 years? I nodded again. He looked down, then back at me. I wish it had gone differently. That line, I wish it had gone differently, is what people say when they're not sorry about what they did, just sorry you reacted to it. I didn't give him an out. I just said, you didn't have to phase me out like that. There was no malice in my voice, just the weight of a truth he'd been too insulated to hear. He nodded slowly. I know. I let it happen. He didn't apologize. But maybe in his way, that was the closest he could come. I said, hope Sophie's doing well. He blinked, surprised at the shift, then smiled, relieved. Yeah. Thanks. And then we parted. Me with a container of Greek yogurt, him with a memory. I walked out into the sun. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was holding anything. Not anger, not shame, not even the ache of what had been taken, just space. Later that week, I got an email from a nonprofit I'd consulted for. They said they were hiring a director of policy integrity, part-time, hybrid, modest pay but full independence. They asked if I'd be interested. I read the job description twice. No corporate jargon, no synergies, just, we need someone who sees what others overlook and knows how to protect systems from the inside out. I said yes. It wasn't a title, it wasn't a ladder, it was a lane. One I could walk in without looking over my shoulder. The work was quiet, reviewing policy gaps, writing frameworks, training small teams on how to think long-term instead of just quarterly. No prestige, but real impact. Sometimes after Zoom calls, I'd sit in my backyard and watch my daughter read on the porch. She'd ask questions about the world, about fairness, about how adults make decisions about whether rules really matter when no one is watching. And I'd answer the best I could. Once she asked me, why did you stop working at the old place? I said, because they stopped listening. She thought about that, then asked, did it make you sad? I said it made me quiet for a while. She nodded like she understood more than she should. Then she said, well, I'm glad you're here more now. And just like that, all the noise that used to fill me, the anger, the doubt, the replayed conversations softened into something close to peace. Because sometimes leaving isn't failure. Sometimes it's the first time someone truly sees you. Even if that someone is 12 and still mixing up her decimals. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I got the message from Kelly. Short. Careful. Hi, Tom. I hope it's okay that I'm reaching out. I've noticed some changes at work meetings I'm not in anymore, people getting looped around me, that kind of thing. I know what happened to you. Or some of it. Can we talk? I stared at the screen for a moment, not because I was surprised, but because it felt like looking into a mirror I'd already turned away from. I remembered the first time I noticed my own name missing from a meeting invite. The first time someone said, let's get Rachel's eyes on this instead. It doesn't hit like a punch. It's quieter than that. Like a room going cold without you noticing. I wrote back. Of course, you're not imagining it. We met at a quiet cafe on the east side. She looked tired. Not sleep-deprived, soul-tired. That's a specific kind of fatigue. I knew it too well. She ordered tea, didn't touch it. I'm not even angry, she said. Not really, just confused. I feel like I've been erased, but the lights are still on and everyone's smiling at me. I nodded. That's how it starts. She said they'd brought in someone new from an outside firm. gave him her projects, had him shadow her for transition. Leadership had begun using phrases like evolution of scope and strategic capacity shifting. They told her not to worry, that she was still invaluable. I almost laughed. They always say that, I said, until they don't. Her eyes welled up, but she blinked hard, swallowed it. That quiet strength, the one we all learn to carry because breakdowns at work aren't professional. She looked at me and asked, "How did you know it was time?" I thought for a long moment. Then I said, "When I stopped hearing my own voice in the room. When I realized I wasn't being challenged, I was being replaced in pieces." She nodded slowly. I told her about the lawyer, the documentation, the timing. I didn't give advice, just facts, just presence. That's what people need when they're unraveling, not solutions, just someone who can sit in the wreckage and not look away. She said I thought I was the only one. I looked at her and said, "That's what they count on." We talked for an hour. Not about tactics, about truth, how betrayal can wear a lanyard, how erasure can come with compliments. Before we left, she said, "I'm going to talk to someone about filing." I nodded. "You'll know what's right when it's time," I said. "And whatever you decide, you're not crazy, you're not weak, and you're not alone." She smiled. For the first time since she sat down. That night I didn't think about Kevin, or Rachel, or the silence of that last elevator ride. I thought about how many others were still inside that building, still smiling, still shrinking, still telling themselves that if they just worked harder it would all make sense. But sometimes the only thing that makes sense is walking away before the walls finish closing in. The next week I got another message, this time from Nate. He just wrote, "Thank you for going first." It's been over a year now. Sometimes it feels like it happened to someone else. A different man in a different suit, walking different hallways, trying not to fall apart in front of frosted glass doors. But other days when the air feels too still, or I pass by a certain street near the old office, it all comes rushing back. Not like a wave, not anymore. More like a shadow that briefly passes over the heart, then moves on. I still have the folder, the one labeled continuity. It sits in a drawer, unopened for months. Not out of fear, not out of nostalgia, just reverence. Because that folder is proof that I was there, that I did the work, that when everything got quiet, when the voices around me dulled and the lights turned inward, I didn't disappear. I watched. I remembered. I chose my moment. And I walked away with my name still intact. There's no plaque for that, no handshake, no article titled "How a Middle Manager Kept His Dignity." But there should be. Because it takes something brutal and sacred to know when your time is being stolen and to leave before they convince you it was never yours to begin with. Some mornings now I sit on the porch with a cup of black coffee and just breathe. My daughter leaves for school with a kiss on the forehead and headphones in her ears. My wife tends the garden in silence. She likes it that way. The house creaks the same way it always did. But now I hear it. I still work, not for legacy, not for status, just for the kind of clarity that comes when the work is honest and no one's watching. Sometimes I get emails from people I barely knew back then. A woman in HR who left 2 months after me. A junior analyst who saw my name vanish from the org chart and started to ask questions of her own. They never ask for advice. They just say, I thought I was the only one. And I write back, you're not. Not all stories end with justice. Some just end with silence, and that too is a kind of record. I'm not proud of how it ended, but I'm not ashamed either. Because I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I didn't let them narrate my absence. I filed a legal complaint and I left. And if that sounds small to you, then you've never been erased from something you built. If this story felt familiar, I hope you know you're not alone. I don't tell this for attention. I tell it so the next man doesn't think he's the only one. Every voice makes the next silence easier to break. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just here, still, whole, quiet, but never invisible again. And that is enough.